So Bruce, why are we starting in chapter 3 rather than chapter 1?
It seemed to me that it was really important for us to get kind of an even plane. For instance, everybody who ran into Jesus starts where chapter 3 starts. They don't know where he came from. They don't know who he is. And so they all have to figure it out, and it takes them most of his ministry to figure it out. So I thought, rather than doing chapter 1 and 2, which are much later conclusions about who he was.
Those are the birth narratives.
Yeah, thank you. That we should start in chapter 3, which is where the disciples would have started.
So chapter 3 starts with John the Baptist and the baptism. How is John different from Jesus?
Well, Jesus, I think, makes that really clear in chapter 7. Maybe we should wait till we get there. But John's an incredibly fascinating figure, usually mostly, sloughed over because he's so overshadowed by Jesus. And somewhere in the study of Luke, a group ought to stop and say, who is this guy? I, for instance, believe that Jesus was really legitimately and seriously a disciple of John's to begin with. All of his top leaders, meaning Peter and Andrew and James and John, were John's disciples first. So John is a better forerunner and prepares the way better than most of us ever stop to realize. And so Jesus takes over his movement when he's arrested and later beheaded. And he's often running with this huge, incredible grassroots movement of reform and revival. And so I think it's really important, but I haven't even still gotten into the background of that very much.
But for those who study or in the study, you may want to just kind of keep that question in the back of your mind. How is John different from Jesus? As Bruce mentions, we'll get to that later in chapter 7. But it's good to kind of just kind of keep that in the back of your minds and ask how is the ministry differentiated? Now Jesus is baptized by John. Why would Jesus?
Always surprising to people, isn't it? Why would somebody as, quote, great as we have now concluded Jesus was, be baptized by somebody else? And that's, that comes out into the story quite a bit and is worth a group's thinking about and discussing a lot. But I would say at least consider the possibility that Jesus didn't know how great he was until after the baptism. That this is indeed his conversion. And so then, to me, chapter 3, the biggest issue and the most exciting piece of all is the baptism.
And what was the significance of the baptism?
To me, the baptism is the huge piece, in many places semi-neglected. I'm not talking about ritual, and I'm not downing it either. I mean, I have baptized people for all my ministry, by sprinkling, by immersion, by everything you could imagine, and the power of the dedication of parents and love for and commitment for their children is wonderful. But I'm talking about a life change, what we used to call conversion, a life-changing event symbolized by baptism. So the real baptism, like real circumcision, is on the inside, Paul kept trying to tell us. But to me, one of the great sadnesses of the Christian faith is that baptism has lost a lot of its power because it's become ritualized. And in fact, it is the beginning of the Christian life and the beginning of putting away the old life, dying, drowning, and being raised by a power not your own out of the old life into a new one. And Christmas has usurped that, so that we have all this incredible focus on a virgin birth instead of on a rebirth, what Jesus called being born anew, and starting baptism is not the end, it's the beginning, but the beginning of a brand new life is the power of the baptism. And the churches that have lost that or minimized it or muted it have lost the whole power of the beginning of walking the path.
So John says, I baptize with water, but the one who comes after will baptize you with the Holy Spirit, with fire.
Yeah, which is a symbol of the Spirit.
Absolutely. Yeah. And are you suggesting that the churches have kind of lost that fieriness, that zest?
Well, Eric, I've been to a few that I say without any doubt whatsoever, they have lost it.
At Jesus' baptism, you mentioned a conversion happens or some sort of awareness. What's your take on that? I mean, the dove comes and we hear this voice from God saying, "This is my son, the beloved."
Well, Jesus, we're told, is about 30 years of age. And he has no ministry before this, and he has the most incredible ministry the world's ever seen after this. So I think that that's evidence to suggest that this is Jesus' own conversion. I don't mean that he wasn't prayerful, thoughtful, serious, or an amazing person in potential. But he doesn't seem to awaken to that until the baptism. So I say legitimately, that's the conversion, the change for him. And he will never see himself in the same light either before that he does after he's heard, "You are my beloved son, and you I'm well pleased." I know lots of Christians who've never ever tracked him. We're supposed to be followers who've never said, "I should be into some kind of experience where I hear that God cares about me too." And if you don't get that, how do you get power to try the new life?
Well, didn't that just only come to Jesus? I mean,
of course, that's why it's totally irrelevant to the rest of us.
What does it mean for God to call Jesus my son, in your understanding?
To him or to me?
To you, to your understanding of him.
Well, I think it's one of the scariest things that can happen to you, right? Because it's much more comfortable to think that you're not that important. Much more comfortable to think that you don't have any true destiny or purpose, and so if you live your own way according to your own light, it's your life and you get to do what you want. Not after baptism, it's not your life anymore. You don't get to do what you want. You have to find a different set of values, a different purpose, a different identity. And I think that's precisely what happened to Jesus and exactly what he's hoping will happen to all of us.
So all of us, in a sense, here at some point are hoping, the hope is that one hears similar words. You are my son, you are my daughter.
In some way, not wooden, but in some fashion, genuine, that you encounter the Holy Spirit, the living God, whatever, and realize, okay, it does matter. My life matters.
I'm connected to something.
That's right. And I can't be in control of it by myself and don't want to be any longer. So I die in order to be reborn.
Die in order to be reborn.
Yeah.
And so you're dying to what?
To the life that you were controlling, that you thought you could do anything you wanted to with. And now you are raised to a life where you are trying to be obedient to the Holy Spirit to guide and comfort and direct you, often into places you don't want to go.
And I imagine that we'll be encountering that what that means to be guided and directed
for
by
the whole rest of the book. You bet.
Yeah. One of the things I like about Luke, too, in particular, is that there's a sequel to Luke, which is the book of Acts. And in the book of Acts, we continue then to find people guided, this time now exclusively by the Spirit, which acts surprisingly like Jesus.
Yes.
Throughout the
more
book.
And more, the longer they try it.
Absolutely.
The more astounding.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you're suggesting that the first chapter then is really about Jesus being set on a path, or becoming aware of a path that is, in a sense, a model for the rest of us. That just as Jesus has a point in which he is becoming aware of a connection to God and his own unique purpose and mission in life, that you're suggesting that so too with us.
What does it mean to be a follower of Jesus? See what Jesus does and never do it like that?
I thought you were just supposed to grow up and learn Sunday school and
then
show up once a week.
And keep controlling your own life your own way. I've tried that too, haven't you?
More often than I'd like to admit.
Doesn't work for me.
So maybe we ought to take a look at this Jesus as we move into chapter 4.
And that's, of course, what Luke tries to do, is help us to look at Jesus.